Edgar Hatfield stood alone in his study, methodically cleaning his Glock 19. This ritual, precise and unyielding, had kept him alive through 12 years of covert operations spanning from the Scottish Highlands to the bustling streets of London and beyond. The photograph resting on his mahogany desk caught a younger Edgar beside his wife, Claire Bennett, both radiant on their wedding day 15 years ago. A moment frozen in time, brimming with hope and unspoken promises. Now, Edgar's life was far from the endless future they dreamed of. The intelligence agency had transformed him into a ghost. Silent, lethal, and invisible. "Ed, you'll be late for Nathan's graduation," Claire called from downstairs. Her voice carried that familiar blend of frustration and fatigue that had become the soundtrack of their marriage over the past 2 years. Edgar holstered the pistol beneath his tailored blazer. Old instincts, remnants of a life Claire believed he'd left behind. She knew only that he'd worked in government security, nothing more. The nightmares, the sudden sharpened senses at the slightest noise, the uncanny ability to vanish into a crowd. She chalked it all up to post-traumatic stress from overseas desk duty. Nathan Hatfield, their 22-year-old son, was graduating from the University of Bath with a degree in business management, ready to take the helm of the family's legitimate security consultancy, the perfect cover for Edgar's true work. Nathan bore Edgar's sharp jawline and stormy blue eyes but had Claire's gentle heart, a combination that filled Edgar with both pride and unease in a world where softness often meant vulnerability. The ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of Bath Abbey, the sunlight streaming through stained glass casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished floor. Edgar lingered at the back, his trained eyes scanning the exits, noting every face with suspicion. Claire sat a few rows ahead, her auburn hair glowing in the afternoon light, dressed in a sleek emerald green dress that hugged her figure just enough to remind Edgar of the woman who once made him believe a normal life was possible. But something was off. His instincts, honed in years of survival, caught subtle signs. Claire's restless flicks to her phone, the nervous twist of her wedding ring, the forced smile she cast his way. He'd seen this before, in targets who knew they were being watched. After the ceremony, the family gathered at the Ivy Brasserie, their usual spot for celebrations. Nathan animatedly recounted his internship at Davenport & Collins, a prestigious law firm in the city. Mr. Hargreaves says I've got real potential, Nathan said, eyes bright with ambition. He thinks I could make partner within 10 years. Edgar's blood ran cold. Hargreaves. He recognized the name, not from official files, but from the way Claire had begun mentioning it casually over the past 6 months. Always professional, always innocent. But Edgar Hatfield had learned to read between the lines. Lines written in shadows and betrayal. So, this Hargreaves, Edgar said carefully, slicing his steak with surgical precision. Do you trust him? Nathan nodded enthusiastically. He's brilliant, Dad. Smart, successful, and he actually listens to me. Not like some of the old partners who treat interns like errand boys. Edgar caught the flicker of unease in Claire's eyes. Barely noticeable, but enough for a man who had interrogated enemies with less obvious tells. She knew something about Hargreaves Nathan didn't. That night, after Nathan had gone out celebrating with friends, Edgar found Claire in their bedroom, mechanically brushing her hair. They used to do this together, him standing behind her at the vanity, sharing dreams, fears, and quiet laughter. Now, she moved like a ghost trapped in a life she no longer wanted. You're proud of him, she said without looking at him in the mirror. Of course, Edgar replied, loosening his tie. She paused, hand trembling slightly. Hargreaves is a good man, she said softly. Successful. Everything Nathan could ever want. The way she said the name, familiar, comfortable, intimate, confirmed Edgar's worst fears. In the intelligence world, it was called pattern recognition. At home, it was a husband's intuition. Edgar had spent years in places where betrayal meant death, where trust was a luxury no one could afford. He'd survived by assuming everyone lied until proven otherwise. He thought coming home would let him lower his guard. He'd been wrong. I'm thinking of taking some time off, Edgar said, watching her reflection. Maybe we could finally take that trip to Cornwall you've been wanting. Claire's face fell. I have a lot of commitments right now. Maybe in a few months. Commitments? Edgar almost smiled bitterly. In Belfast, He'd broken a man's fingers one by one until he confessed to smuggling arms. The man had used the same word when refusing to talk. Edgar kissed the top of Claire's head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with something unfamiliar. Cologne. Whenever you're ready, love. That night, as Claire slept beside him, Edgar stared at the ceiling, not with desperation but with cold calculation. He wasn't planning as a betrayed husband, but as a ghost who had just identified his next targets. He'd spent 15 years trying to be the man Claire deserved. Now, it was time to remember what he really was. Edgar's shift back into operational mode was as smooth as silk sliding over steel, and just as deadly. While Claire believed he was taking a sabbatical to find himself amidst the rolling hills of Somerset, Edgar was orchestrating the most critical surveillance mission of his career. The irony of hunting your own family was not lost on him. After all, the best intelligence came from within arm's reach. Access to Claire's routines was effortless. Bank statements, phone records, her digital footprint laid bare like an open book. 6 months ago, her patterns had subtly shifted. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she claimed to attend a book club, though the same novel seemed to remain perpetually unfinished. Fridays were reserved for girls' nights, after which she returned smelling faintly of fine wine and a scent Edgar recognized all too well. A masculine cologne, expensive and deliberately chosen. Weekends brought shopping trips where bags remained mysteriously empty, yet Claire returned glowing, as if she'd acquired a secret she dared not share. The first undeniable proof came in the form of a burner phone, cleverly taped beneath her vanity drawer. A classic spy's hiding spot. The device held a single contact saved under the letter H. Text messages were coded but followed a pattern Edgar knew from his own covert communications. Asterisk, the package will be delivered Tuesday at the usual location. Confirmed. Asterisk, recipient will be waiting. Asterisk, special delivery Friday. Higher value this time. Asterisk, to the untrained eye, it might have seemed like dry business chatter. But Edgar recognized the tradecraft. The package was Claire. The recipient was the man she was meeting. His next objective was visual confirmation. On a drizzly Tuesday morning, Edgar stationed himself at a cafe opposite the Bath Royal Crescent Hotel. From his seat, he watched as Claire stepped into the lobby, her tailored navy coat cinching a figure that still turned heads despite the years. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, and her auburn hair, usually tied neatly, fell in loose waves that brushed her shoulders with a careless elegance. Moments later, a tall man joined her, Peter Hargreaves. He was everything Edgar expected. Sharply dressed in a bespoke gray suit, silver flecks at his temples, and an air of practiced confidence. Peter's hand rested lightly on Claire's lower back as they moved toward the elevator, an intimacy born of familiarity rather than discretion. Edgar felt none of the boiling rage or heartbreak that might have consumed a civilian's heart. Instead, there was a cold satisfaction, like a hunter confirming the scent of prey. But the true shock came days later, when Edgar dug deeper into Peter Hargreaves's background. Using contacts from his agency days, favors owed, and information traded in whispered conversations, Edgar uncovered a buried truth. Peter was not just Claire's lover. He was Nathan's biological father. The DNA records, buried deep within legal databases accessible only to someone with Edgar's clearance, told a story of betrayal stretching back more than 2 decades. While Edgar was deployed on a classified operation in Belfast, Claire had an affair with Peter. She was 3 months pregnant when Edgar returned and proposed, believing he was saving the woman he loved and the child she carried. Nathan was never Edgar's son. Edgar parked his car outside Davenport and Collins, watching through the frosted glass as Peter guided Nathan through legal documents, his hand resting on the young man's shoulder with a possessiveness that spoke louder than words. Father mentoring son, neither aware Edgar was observing, nor knowing Edgar knew. The pieces fit together with brutal clarity. Claire hadn't started an affair 6 months ago. She had reignited an old flame. Peter's mentorship wasn't mere professional interest. He was grooming his son, waiting for the right moment to reveal a secret that could shatter a family. But the most devastating discovery came when Edgar hacked Peter's personal emails. The man was careless with digital security, overconfident in ways that would have gotten him killed in Edgar's world. His correspondence revealed a chilling plan. Claire and Peter wanted Edgar dead, not by divorce, but by murder. Peter had hired local thugs skilled in making deaths look like unfortunate accidents. Edgar's planned sabbatical coincided perfectly with the timing of the hit. No regular schedule, no witnesses, no one to notice his disappearance. The plan was simple. Kill Edgar, stage it as a random crime, then have Peter comfort the grieving widow and stepson. After an appropriate mourning period, he would propose to Claire, legally adopt Nathan, and finally claim the family he'd lost 23 years ago. Edgar almost admired the elegance of the plot. That evening, dinner was a quiet affair at their home in Wells. Nathan spoke excitedly about a new case Peter was letting him handle. Claire smiled and nodded, playing the supportive mother while furtively texting beneath the table, likely coordinating Edgar's assassination. You know, Edgar said, cutting his steak with the precision of a surgeon, I've been thinking of picking up some new hobbies. Maybe learning a few new skills. That sounds lovely, dear, Claire murmured without looking up. What kind of skills? Nathan asked, genuinely curious. Edgar's smile didn't reach his eyes. Skills that help you solve problems permanently. Neither Claire nor Nathan caught the double meaning, but Edgar wasn't speaking to family anymore. He was issuing a declaration of war to enemy combatants who'd infiltrated his home and plotted his death. The ghost they thought they'd killed was about to come back very much alive. Edgar's first rule in any operation was simple. Let the enemy make the first move. 2 weeks after uncovering the full extent of the betrayal, he orchestrated the perfect trap. He began a new routine, one designed to lure Peter's hired killers right into his sights. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, Edgar would jog along the River Avon, carrying a sleek black briefcase, an obvious bait, as if stuffed with sensitive documents or a small fortune in cash. He'd park in the underground garage of the Bath Shopping Center, Level B3, a dimly lit, isolated spot with minimal security cameras and multiple escape routes, a textbook kill zone. Edgar made sure Claire knew about this routine. Pillow talk had always been her weakness, and she couldn't resist sharing details that made her seem caring and attentive. Within days, Edgar's movements were being reported back to Peter through coded conversations Edgar intercepted via bugs hidden around the house, the kind of bugs Claire had never noticed, no matter how many girls' nights she attended. The attack came on a damp Thursday evening. Edgar parked in his usual spot, briefcase in hand, and settled in to wait. His earpiece crackled with nervous chatter from 2 men approaching. Kenny Keller and Raoul Wilcox, local crooks with reputations more for petty crime than professional hits. Peter had clearly gone cheap, probably to maintain plausible deniability. Are you sure about this, mate? He looks military, Kenny whispered into his radio. Stick to the plan, came Peter's voice through the intercepted frequency. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Take the briefcase, take his wallet. Leave him bleeding. Edgar almost laughed. If these were Peter's best assassins, the man was far more arrogant than Edgar had imagined. The 2 men closed in from either side, a classic pincer move that might have worked on an average suburban jogger. Edgar waited until they were within 10 feet. Then, 15 years of close-quarters combat training snapped into action. Kenny went down first, Edgar's elbow connecting with his temple with just the right amount of force to render him unconscious but unharmed. He needed one alive and functional for what came next. Raoul drew a knife, but Edgar's knee struck his solar plexus, dropping him to the cold concrete, gasping for air. Edgar stripped the knife and radio from him, then zip-tied both men to a concrete pillar. Kenny's phone rang. The burner phone Edgar had expected. Modulating his voice with a CIA vocal coach's trick, Edgar deepened his tone and added a working-class accent. Is it done? Came Claire's voice, tight with nervous anticipation. Edgar's blood turned to ice. Knowing Claire wanted him dead was one thing. Hearing her eagerness was a knife twisting deep. He put up more of a fight than expected, Edgar said, watching Kenny stir. But yeah, he's gone. Good, Claire breathed. What about the mess? Don't worry. I'll need the rest of my money. And your son wants to see you too. There was a pause. My son. Nathan's at the office with Peter. Seems everyone's got questions about your accident. I'm coming by later for the money, and a chat. Edgar ended the call and faced his captives. You've just been part of your last amateur hour, he told them. But don't worry. You live long enough to learn what happens when you take on the wrong target. Using Kenny's knife, he cut him loose and handed over his car keys. you're driving straight to the police. You'll confess to attempted murder, name Peter Hargreaves as the contractor, and provide recordings, phone numbers, and bank records. You'll do this because the alternative is a demonstration of techniques from places your government doesn't officially acknowledge. Kenny nodded frantically, clutching his bleeding scalp. And Raoul? Edgar asked, turning to the other man, who was catching his breath. Mr. Wilcox has another assignment, Edgar said. You're calling Peter, telling him the job went sideways. One of you's dead, the other badly wounded, but the target is down. Request immediate extraction and medical help. Why would I do that? Raoul gasped. Edgar smiled, cold, predatory. Because you're delivering a message he'll understand. Half an hour later, Edgar drove through the calm streets of Wells toward the house where Claire waited, expecting news of her husband's death, where Nathan was probably celebrating with his biological father, where the family Edgar had built with his own hands was about to learn what happens when you betray a ghost who refuses to stay dead. As he pulled into the driveway, the living room lights shone brightly. Through the window he saw shadows. Claire pacing nervously, Peter lounging confidently in Edgar's favorite armchair, Nathan standing nearby with champagne flutes raised. They were celebrating. Edgar checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. in 3 minutes. Claire would open the door, expecting a hired killer bearing grim tidings. Instead, she would find a ghost come home to collect a very specific kind of debt. The game was about to begin. Edgar stood on the porch of his own home, finger hovering over the doorbell as he savored the final seconds before everything shifted irreversibly. Behind the frosted glass, he glimpsed restless movement, the silhouettes of people who believed themselves safe, who thought they had orchestrated his demise with impunity. The chime rang through the house like a death knell. Footsteps approached. Quick, familiar steps that belonged unmistakably to Claire. The porch light flicked on, casting Edgar fully in view through the peephole. He positioned himself deliberately in the glow, ensuring his face was unmistakable. The locks disengaged. 2 deadbolts and a chain, all installed at Edgar's insistence years ago for security. The door cracked open. Claire's face appeared in the gap, her expression flickering from anticipation to confusion, then to horror in a heartbeat. "Hello, darling," Edgar said, his voice calm, almost conversational, as if greeting her after a long day. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Claire's complexion drained, pale as parchment. Behind her, Edgar caught fragments of voices. Peter's smooth tone discussing loose ends, Nathan's laughter at a joke about his old man finally being out of the picture. "Edgar," Claire whispered, disbelief lacing her voice. "But you're supposed to be dead." Edgar stepped forward, forcing her back into the foyer. "Yes, I know," he replied evenly. "Funny thing about hiring amateurs for a professional job. They tend to disappoint." He closed the door with a decisive click and engaged the deadbolts. The sound echoed through the house like gunfire. "Claire?" Peter's voice called from the living room. "Who's at the door?" Edgar arched an eyebrow. "Well, aren't you going to introduce me to your guests?" Claire's mouth opened and closed, mute. He saw her mind racing, trying to reconcile the living man standing in her hall with the husband she believed was bleeding out in a parking garage. She stammered. "Cat got your tongue?" Edgar teased, stepping past her with deliberate heaviness that made the hardwood floor groan beneath his boots. "Don't worry, love," he said, voice low and threatening. "I have plenty to say, for all of us. In the living room, the conversation died. Peter Hargreaves lounged in Edgar's well-worn leather chair, swirling a glass of whiskey that had once been Edgar's favorite. Nathan stood near the fireplace, his cheeks flushed with the mixture of alcohol and shock. "Dad?" Nathan's voice cracked, uncertain. "What are you doing here? We were told you were dead." Edgar poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light. "Interesting assumption," he said. "Who exactly told you that?" Peter recovered first, masking his surprise with a calculating smile. "Edgar, what a surprise. We were just celebrating Nathan's promotion." "Promotion?" Edgar echoed, savoring the burn of the bourbon. "How thoughtful of you to celebrate my son's success in my absence." Peter's gaze sharpened as he repeated, "Your son." The room tensed, silence stretching taut like a wire. Claire stepped between Edgar and the others. An uncertain shield or a desperate barrier? Edgar couldn't tell it, I think. Edgar said finally. It's time we had an honest conversation about family loyalty and the price of betrayal. Nathan looked between the adults, sensing the tension but not grasping the full weight. Dad, what's going on? Why is everyone acting so strange? Edgar smiled. A smile devoid of warmth but rich with purpose. Excellent question, Nathan. Perhaps Mr. Hargreaves would like to explain why he hired Kenny Keller and Raoul Wilcox to murder me tonight in a parking garage. The accusation landed like a grenade. Peter's carefully constructed facade cracked for a moment, revealing cold calculation behind his eyes. That's quite an accusation, he said smoothly. Do you have any proof? Edgar produced the burner phone, placing it on the coffee table. Would you like me to play back some of the more interesting conversations? Or perhaps discuss the DNA evidence proving you're Nathan's biological father? Nathan's hand trembled, dropping a champagne glass that shattered on the floor. Amber liquid spread like spilled blood. What surprise? Edgar's voice was flat. The family you thought you knew has been built on lies for 23 years. Claire finally spoke, her voice trembling. Edgar, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Edgar said coldly. I understand my wife has been planning my murder. I understand the son I raised isn't mine. I understand you've been celebrating my death while drinking my whiskey in my house. Peter stood abruptly, hand reaching inside his jacket. Edgar's bourbon glass flew through the air, striking Peter's temple with surgical precision. The lawyer slumped back, dazed but conscious. I wouldn't, Edgar warned. The next thing I throw will be considerably sharper. Nathan stared at the blood trickling down Peter's face, then at Edgar, then at Claire. Mom, is it true? Is he my real father? Claire's composure shattered. Nathan, sweetheart, I can explain. 23 years, Edgar interrupted. 23 years of birthday parties, little league games, bedtime stories. All for a child who was never mine. While his real father waited in the wings to reclaim his family. Edgar picked up a framed photo from the mantelpiece. Nathan's high school graduation. You know the beautiful irony? He said quietly. I would have loved him regardless. If you'd told me the truth from the start, I'd have raised him as my own. But you chose deception. You chose betrayal. You chose murder. Peter pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding temple. Edgar, let's be reasonable. No need for violence. We can work out an arrangement. An arrangement? Edgar laughed, humorless. Like the one where you hired thugs to kill me? Like the one where you've been sleeping with my wife while I paid for my son's education. He's not your son, Peter snapped, losing control that he never was. Claire whispered. Peter's admission hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Nathan made a sound like a wounded animal, staggering back against the wall. Edgar nodded slowly. There it is. The truth. He turned to Claire, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. And you, my darling wife? Any last secrets before we discuss your future? Claire wiped her eyes, and for a moment, Edgar glimpsed the defiance that had once drawn him to her. You were never home, Edgar. Years at a time, off doing God knows what for the government. I was lonely, pregnant, and scared. Peter offered me everything you couldn't. And now? She whispered. Now I'm supposed to be dead. We were going to be a real family. Edgar set down his glass and looked out at the peaceful suburban street. A world that had once seemed so full of promise. Here's what happens next, he said without turning. Peter tells me who else knows about tonight's failed operation. Then you all learn what happens when you betray a man who spent 15 years perfecting the art of making problems disappear. He turned. And in that moment, they saw not Edgar the husband and father, but the predator lurking beneath. The game has changed, Edgar said. And I'm afraid none of you understand the rules you've chosen to play. Edgar settled back into his chair, the weight of the evening pressing down like the heavy oak beams overhead. The room was thick with silence, broken only by the quiet sobs escaping Claire's lips and the tense breathing of the three conspirators who once thought they held all the cards. Let's begin, Edgar said, voice steady and cold. Peter, you start. Tell me everything, no omissions, no excuses. How did you find Kenny Keller and Raoul Wilcox? And what was the plan in full? Peter dabbed at his bleeding temple, eyes darting like a cornered fox. I'm not saying a word without my solicitor. Edgar let out a humorless laugh. You're a lawyer, and as of 6 hours ago, you're also under federal investigation. I doubt legal counsel is your biggest worry right now. He reached for his laptop and opened a file packed with damning evidence. Bank records, wire transfers, offshore accounts. £47,000 funneled into Cayman Islands accounts over 6 months. Money that didn't match declared income. Peter's face drained of color. I have friends in interesting places, Edgar said quietly. Same friends currently reviewing your client trust accounts. Embezzlement, Peter. Serious charges? Nathan looked between them. Confusion and disbelief etched across his face. You told me your parents were professors who died in a car accident. Everyone embellishes. Peter snapped defensively. Edgar flipped the page. Peter's teenage years were a litany of foster homes, expulsions, arrests. Far from the polished image he'd sold Nathan. You told my son you came from nobility, Edgar said. But you're white trash with a talent for violence and lying. Claire's protest was weak. Edgar, stop. You're being cruel. Cruel? Edgar's gaze turned icy. Shall we discuss your background, Claire? Or should Peter fill Nathan in on the others? The others. Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. Edgar revealed more files. Peter's 4 marriages, all young, naive women from good families. Each ended with Peter extracting money, connections, and opportunities before discarding them. Nathan's face paled further. You're a predator, Peter, Edgar said softly. Using women, exploiting families. The only difference with Claire is I came home before you could finish the cycle. Peter seethed. You think your government killings make you a hero? I never claimed that, Edgar replied. But I don't target my own family. He turned to Nathan, slumped and pale. The question now is, what do we do with this? Claire stepped forward. Edgar, I know you're angry. Angry? Edgar laughed. A sound devoid of warmth. You mistake my emotion. I'm planning. From behind the fireplace, Edgar retrieved a military-grade satellite phone, encrypted and ready. When I uncovered your little conspiracy, I made calls. Old friends, current colleagues, people who owe me favors. He raised the phone. Peter Hargreaves's law practice is under audit by the IRS, the Bar Association, and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Peter's rage boiled over. You can't do this. Edgar's voice remained calm. I already have. Client trust accounts, partnership agreements, tax returns, all under scrutiny. By morning, your license will be suspended. Nathan's voice was weak. Dad, what are you doing? I'm teaching you about consequences, Edgar said. Betrayal has a price. Your biological father hired killers to murder the man who raised you. What's the appropriate response? Nathan shook his head, overwhelmed. Edgar continued, in my world, when someone tries to kill you, there are 2 options. Kill them first or make them wish they were dead. Peter backed toward the window, calculating escape routes. Edgar noticed but said nothing. The beauty of modern surveillance, he said conversationally, is that everything leaves a trail. The hired killers were in custody, eager to talk. Edgar pulled out his phone, displaying a text. Asterisk package. Delivered. Both recipients talkative. Recommend proceeding to phase 2. Asterisk, what's phase 2? Claire whispered, dread coloring her voice. Edgar smiled, cold, merciless. Phase 2 is when you all learn. What happens when you declare war on a man whose job for 15 years was to eliminate threats to national security. He walked to the front door, turning the deadbolts with sharp, echoing clicks. The house is secure. No one leaves until we finish this family discussion. He returned to his chair, poured another bourbon, and raised his glass in a mock toast to family loyalty. He said, voice low, and the price of betrayal.